Hello guys, welcome back to the Perpetua podcast. It's James Rankin with you again here today, and today I'm joined by my favourite redhead meathead, Jack O'Neill. What's going on, man? How are you?
What's happening, James? Thank you very much for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Man, it's my absolute pleasure. Jack, can you give the people who maybe don't know you a quick rundown? Who are you? What do you do? What have you done? The good stuff.
Name's Jack O'Neill. Castleknock, Dublin, born through and through. Started off in the early days playing a lot of rugby. That's where like my initial sporting career would have came from. Played Leinster underage, played Irish underage, did some representative rugby. Ended up getting badly injured around 21 years of age, so decided to go back into college to further my education. Studied exercise physiology in UCD, and now I'm in the middle of doing my PhD in UCD in the area of energy availability, rest and metabolism, and athletes as well. So it's been a while. In the meantime, now during that period, I've done plenty of coaching, and I've also done a stint, a good little bit, almost a year, in Perpetua as well, doing some of the CrossFit class and doing some PT. So that's my association with James.
Yeah. So you're not just a meathead, you're actually a complete nerd doing a PhD using words that most people don't even understand.
I'll probably start it off as somewhat of a meathead, like if I'm going to be honest about it, like every teenage boy. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't until the later years. 100%, man. Like the stuff you see in the mirror, that's all that's important. Then it wasn't until like much later into my sporting career, and like much later actually until I actually got into college and did my PT certification, and also did the undergraduate course. So they started, really getting into the science behind it and turning it into like the nerdy side of sport and exercise. So it was a good transition. I've been through the whole spectrum of what you could say in terms of the experience, which has always been a good one.
Savage. And what's your, give me a bit of history on your sporting, like you said about rugby and that, but like you've been through a bit of is illness the right word, in the past 18 months?
Yes, I have. That was pretty bad knockdown. Yeah. So this would have also been going from the transition of the meathead into the nerdy meathead, the meathead into the nerdy meathead, and it was coming from, I was finished the undergraduate course. I had to wait out a year before I was able to get funding to start my PhD. So it was during that year I was working over in Perpetua, and it was a mixture of me wanting to fill the year with as much work as possible, whilst trying to earn as much money as possible for the ideas going forward. And it was an accumulation of what started off was, getting up early and filling the day with work, to what ended up being a very long couple of months where I was getting up early, but then I wasn't living adequately in terms of, looking after myself. I was drinking loads of coffee. I wasn't eating correctly. I was feeling, I was empty. I was making loads of withdrawals, but I wasn't making any deposits. I was filling up the week with clients. So I thought, the more, the better. And, it got to the stage where there's some nights I was knocking out only like 4-5 hours sleep max, because I was having difficulty getting to sleep, and then I was getting back up early again. And this went on for a couple of months without making the correct adjustments or making the necessary, kind of things with it. And I ended up contracting what started off as viral meningitis. So swelling of the brain, the spinal cord, didn't know what was going on. I started out getting these whopper headaches, and stuff, like getting dizziness and stuff. I even remember talking to you in Perpetua, going, man, I feel like I'm dying on the inside.
Remember that time walking across the bridge after we got a Seven Wonders?
Man, I thought I was going across the dimensions, man. I was God, I thought I was going to keel over and die, man.
So guys, background on that one, we were taking classes and PT in the morning, and then me and Jack will go for breakfast and walking across the footbridge across the Liffey, and it bounces a little bit whenever you get to the middle of it, doesn't it? And we got to the middle of it, and Jack just grabbed me and said, "Jesus, man, I think I'm going to faint." I was like, "Man, you can't faint here. I'm 70 kilos. You're 100 and something. It's like, if you faint, you're staying here. We're nearly at the gym.
I'm bringing you down with me.
Let's get back there." With me. And then from there, you just had a real, I was going to say a steady decline. It was a pretty sharp decline from there, wasn't it?
So what it was that whatever the viral infection was, first of all, from the lack of sleep, the overtraining, the lack of, resting, or the lack of just taking adequate time off things, I was just constantly stimulating my sympathetic nervous system. My fight or flight was just on 100%. My immune system was shot to pieces. So this viral infection was probably quite trivial, that anyone who was, in a good, healthy state would quite easily fight off. However, it got to a stage where my immune system couldn't fight for nothing. And it started off with the headaches, and I remember the swelling, the pains behind the eyes and stuff. And what they reckon happened was whatever the viral infection was started doing some damage to my inner ear, so your labyrinth or the vestibular nerve of the inner ear, and that's where I was getting the balance issues, where I was getting the dizziness all the time and everything. And after I finally stopped the work, I remember I was stuck for a solid 3-4 weeks in the house. I couldn't leave, couldn't do anything. I had to lie down in bed, because anytime I got up to move around, I started getting dizzy. And sometimes the dizziness was so bad, I was throwing up and stuff in the bathroom. I literally couldn't do anything over the Christmas. And it ran me right down into the ground, because even when the heavy dizziness kind of subsided and I was left with this residual dizziness, I ended up staying another 6-8 weeks in the house. I lost all motivation to do anything. I was just playing PlayStation. I was eating all the wrong foods. My body clock was all over the shop, and I just kind of lost everything. Lost a mill of myself. But that was January last year that rough period happened, and it was around the end of January, February. About mid-February that I just slowly started getting back and doing things that you see me doing now and stuff and I started off small and just worked my way from there.
Cool. So that's something that I'd actually love to touch on with you, is you're someone who's come from a near elite background. You were able to squat more than most people would ever squat in their life. You have pretty, I don't really want to say this because you're here, you have pretty good natural ability whenever it comes to stuff. You're a pretty natural athlete, and you've come from that high level, and you've gone way down. How did you find starting off again, going really slow? Was that difficult for you? And how did you plan it out, or did you have a coach? What way did you work it?
It was pretty bad, because all self-confidence and my self-esteem was just non-existent, because especially in the early days, if I tried doing something, the dizziness would start coming back. And although it never got as bad as it was during the Christmas time where I was throwing up and stuff, because I would just get the slight sensation of the dizziness, the psychological side of me was just giving up more or less straight away. So even trivial tasks such as walking and doing things around the house and stuff, anything that involved too much movement, I was just abstaining from altogether. And it took a while. It was the first time I've ever, I spent my whole life playing, high competitive elite rugby, moving through college, doing well in college, working myself into a PhD. And it wasn't until only recently that was the first time I ever had, what you could easily classify as mental health issues, or issues with my mental health, as in for the first time I was experiencing anxiety. I have an inner monologue, and it was the first time that I was experiencing, not loss of control, but the real self-doubt and self-critiquing. And it was something that was brand new. All my years of rugby and all my years of college and everything else would not have prepared me whatsoever for any of this. And it wasn't until that I went to the GP, and they just said, you need to get talking. There's medications you can stuff and take for the dizziness that can help, but you really need to just get talking to someone. So it was then I just went for the first time in my entire life, because I've been on the macho man background. I am originally the meathead. We don't talk to other people unless it's about numbers you're pushing, or you don't talk to people about your feelings, man. And that, and it was a complete change, So I went and I talked to a therapist, and it was from that over the space of a couple of months that I really managed to change my whole mindset, not only in terms of the illness, but everything else that I was doing with living. And it's definitely 100% something that helped me get back to where I am now at the minute. Yeah.
Good for you, man. So that's hard.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I was just saying, fair play to you. That's it's not something that's easy to do, and then it's not something that's easy to talk about that you've done. So That's a big step, especially
oh,
for someone like you.
yeah, and it's like it's a big thing that there's a lot, like it's only after you've been through it that you realize that you can see it as well in other people, that they also too are suffering. And all of a sudden, like, you know, something I was like, geez, you know, mental health, I don't know what all that jazz is about. And then it's when it actually happens to you that you really understand how would you say, not damaging, but like how, you know, intense it can be, the experience, the whole experience for an individual. Like, so, you know, it just makes you a lot more understanding of it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That's great. And then what about training then? So how did you find starting slow and building back up, and what way did you structure all that?
It was difficult at the start because I was up at I weighed myself in January and I was around 108 kilos, and I stopped weighing myself after that because I just feel like I was eating so much toast and so much Haribo. I was like, it's only going to be bad. So I don't actually know what my peak weight was. I guesstimate it was probably around 112, but I was thick. Wow. And I was thick in all the wrong ways. Like, so initially it was quite difficult in the sense that because I've been lying down for so long, all my joints were in bits. I had maintained muscle mass from like eating my food and stuff. However, the stability, the joint stability, you know, this like functional strength that I used to have was just all gone. So simple things like even RDLs, lunges, they were, although like the main primary movers, your quads and your glutes were working fine, it was in around the tops of the hips, the knees, ankles, my lower back, everything was just shot to pieces because I'd spent so much time in bed and sitting down over the past 2.5-3 months. So starting off, it was just, my primary goal starting off was just to shed some of the fluff. And the big thing that helped me do that was, it was somewhat nutrition at the start, but my primary focus was just getting movement again, and I did that through steps. So I was glad I was coming into the brighter days. It was around March, April, so I was getting into it was getting a little bit brighter, summertime, and I just started putting away steps. Started off small, doing 3Ks, you know, in the morning, maybe a 2K in the afternoon, and just started increasing the walks. And not only was it helping in terms of just active calories, it was helping in the fact that I was clearing my head, I was leaving the house, and started building self-confidence again, you know, well, completing this 5K walk, I'm not feeling too bad, I didn't get too dizzy, you know, and it just built on itself from there. The training that I was doing was lightweight, plenty of moving, lots of your basics that the coaches will get you to do, that say you're building the foundational strengths, things like your single leg RDLs, your single leg squats, your glute bridges, a lot of your scap push-ups, I was doing all the stability work whilst doing tons of this walking in the early days, just to build the foundation again so I could actually lift some weights. And it wasn't until about March, April that I started looking at moving actual weights again, going back to things like the squats, going back to things like, so it was a good 4 to 6 weeks or so of just tons of walking, some core exercises, some scapular exercises, and some glute stability stuff.
Madness. Fair play, man. And for those who follow you on Instagram, you're obviously at a stage now where things are moving again. Like you're repping out pause deadlifts, and you've got a phenomenal little garage setup going on. Like, so how are things feeling now? Like, is the body feeling good? Like, where do you think you are on the spectrum to where you were before you got sick compared to where you are now?
Well, the big thing with what happened with the illness was, like, I was living very incorrectly beforehand in terms of, like, I was going out on weekends, I wasn't getting the adequate recovery in, I wasn't doing as much listening to the body. Although I've learned this through college and coaching, and you know yourself, you tell your clients you need to listen to your body. Although I believed I was listening to the body, and I believed, oh, I know I'm getting everything in balance, you know, I've done the maths, I've done the calculations, but realistically I wasn't. Like, you know yourself, I wasn't you know, like, and I was just, you know, and looking at it, it was no way sustainable. There's no real future plan from it. And like, although I was making some gains, yes, and I had like good body composition, it just wasn't under the right circumstances. So was after getting sick, it really was like, I'm not saying I'm glad I got sick, but I'm glad I've recovered the way I did from it, because I've managed to learn how to live accordingly and in a much better fashion. So my training now is much more structured in terms of allowing appropriate adaptation. So allowing adequate recovery to take place between sessions, not pushing it too hard, having the right nutrition in place. There's also, now I'm genuinely listening to my body because I've minimized my caffeine intake. You know, there's no more drinking on the weekends or anything. I can truly listen to my body, and I can swap around sessions. So maybe instead of a conditioning session, I just swap that ahead to Thursday and bring back the mobility session to allow myself that little bit more time to recover. And I've been acquiring strength and levels of fitness more efficiently than I ever have throughout my entire career playing. Like, because even in the past, before like I got into college, you know, I was living like, you know, the fast life and stuff. A lot of it was information coming from an actual coach. I didn't really know the workings of it, so I was still doing what I was told, but I didn't have this independence knowledge of why this is the way we program and why this is, you would put certain sessions in certain places. So where I am now, although I've lifted heavier weights in the past and stuff, and I've done better things in terms of conditioning and fitness in the past, now I've never been in a more appropriate place to continue progressing my training forward. So like I said, with like just keeping the recovery in the right place, timings of sessions, it's in a good place.
Savage. So like, what's, with regards to your training and your recovery and your nutrition and stuff now, how do you prioritize things? Like, how do you know today I shouldn't do a recovery, or today I should do a recovery session, or today I should do a hard session, or like, what are your priorities and what are the buckets to help you decide all these things?
Some of this is autonomous or subjective kind of feelings. You know, when you wake up and you were supposed to be recovered by the Wednesday morning, and you wake up and you feel like a bus has run you over 3 times, and it's like, and in your head, you're like, this was not part of the plan. Like, this was meant to be Wednesday, you know. So sometimes, so there is that sense of it, you know, where if I'm knocked off the horse, if I'm taken off the smokes, I'll put in a different session. I'll schedule a mobility session, and you'll still, like, in terms of a week or a fortnightly cycle, you'll still get the programmed volume in of the conditioning and of this. So it's not going to disappear just because you switched it out for a different session. So there's that, which is a big one. Another one that I would use is active calories spent in exercise. So I do have a watch. I have an Apple Watch which does a lot of the recording. However, although it's not, this is exactly how many calories burnt, the watch is still a very good indication of movement and heart rate. So if it has a very high active calorie number, I know the watch did a lot of moving in conjunction with a higher heart rate. So I do know I was under some physiological stress. So I try not to exceed, in terms of exercise, 500 active calories in a session. So sometimes if I'm quite fatigued, or if I'm a little bit fatigued coming into the start of the session, I might already hit that mark before I get towards the conditioning and stuff, where I'll swap the conditioning to another day, or I'll push it to the next day. So I try and never exceed 500 active calories in a weekly set, like in my normal day-to-day sessions. After that, like, there is odd sessions where you'll do large active calories, like where you're either doing something like endurance based, or where you're just going for a very long walk, which is okay. But in terms of lifting or any sort of intensity, I do not try and exceed that 500 mark. So you're looking at 45 minutes. Then after that, there wouldn't really be, I don't have much more monitoring apart from the subjective feel of the sensation of like injuries and stuff. So sometimes when I notice my hip, the front of my hip's getting very tight, like, I don't know, you're a Squat University fan, you know, and you feel like the impingements in the front of the shoulders coming in with, you know, especially like with the hips and stuff, when you feel the hip flexors getting super, super tight, and you look at the program and you have to do like 10 by 10 on squats. maybe today's not the day. Maybe I'm going to foam roll the hip flexors and do some glute reactivation work, you know, to kind of, balance out. Tomorrow I'll give it another go. I might do some swapping some upper body instead, you know. So the nice thing is, my training is, I take bits and pieces from like the CrossFit that I learned from being in Perpetua, but at the same time, it's not necessarily one modality of training. I
love that. I kind of love what you're saying there. It's something that I preach, and you preach whenever you're here as well, is like creating autonomy, and like you need to be able to know how you feel. So if you come into class or you do a live workout or whatever the thing is, and coach says, right, the idea is today 21:15:9 burpees over the bar and thrusters. We want you to go hell for leather. But you've had 4 nights sleep. You're trying to hit like your quarterly or end of year target or whatever the thing is, and you're stressed to the hilt. Ignore it.
Yeah.
Just move, just be steady. But that's on you, like as an athlete, as a person, to recognize and go, listen, I'm fucked today. This is not what I should be doing. Maybe I should just go home. Maybe I shouldn't go to class at all. Yeah. Whereas a lot of people have that thing of going 5 days a week, I've got to do it. I've got to do it hard. I've got to do it hard every time. And then this is probably where CrossFit does get that bad reputation of people being like, oh yeah, my shoulder's fucked, my hip's fucked. It's like, yeah, well, because you're trying to do all the things all the time, like what Jack did. But we need to but we need to be able to pull that all back.
And this is what a lot of my upcoming research is actually in. So the area of the terminology of it is low energy availability. So to quickly coin what energy availability is, so you have energy balance where you have calories in versus calories out. And if you have less calories coming in, more calories coming out, more calories coming out, you're in a negative energy balance. If you're the opposite, so more in, less out, you're in a positive. And then you have energy balance is what it's referred to. Now, there is then the term where you have your energy intake minus your exercise energy. So whatever you did just for the session, so not including your physical activity, walking to the shop or anything, just what you did in that session. And then you take that from your energy intake and then you divide it by your fat-free mass. So you're basically your total body mass minus your body fat. I know that equation is quite complicated, but we take this figure, guys, and what you're left with is a certain amount of calories per kilogram fat-free mass. So fat-free mass includes skeletal muscle, so your skeletal muscle mass, your bones, your brain, liver, stomach, kidneys, all your organs as well, all your active calories, so all your active organs, active tissues like the heart, and you're left with a figure like of 30 calories per kilogram fat-free mass. So what happens when you have too little available energy for the body and you do this for too long of a period of time is where the body starts showing symptomatic. It goes into kind of like a self-preservation mode. So it's right in this self-preservation mode where you get the spliss in the road. So this is where you start becoming symptomatic, right? And I'll go through the symptoms of what they are. And you can either know that this is the body entering a state of low energy availability. I do need to accommodate these symptoms happening and I need to make the right choices to, regain optimal energy availability. And then there's the other road where it's like, yeah, let's do this. I know this is just, it's sore for a reason. It's sore because I'm growing, right? And you get people that literally just go, pain, no pain, no gain, right? And the thing with this, so the thing what needs to happen at this point is, because don't forget, people got very successful driving through pain. David Goggins, some of the top CrossFit athletes, you learn something psychologically that you just don't. Right. However, too much of this too often can lead to long-term issues with the body and symptoms with the body that are present. And these can include, an increase in injuries. You're talking a lot of ACLs in female, sensations of feeling cold all the time, trouble with digestion, you're getting constipation, you're getting diarrhea. A lot of time in females, you get cessation of their period as well. So they could and if they are too chronically in a state of low energy availability, there's some elite female athletes that go a year plus 2 years without ever having their period. So it's being educated that there is time and place for that hard push. However, there needs to be a good way to monitor this so that you don't go too far into it and that you're just able to control the amount of pain that you're getting. So this is where a lot of my research comes into, where we're monitoring or basically developing systems and protocols that best monitor this in athletes.
And what's your hypothesis? What do you think you're going to get from this? What's going to be the best way?
It's probably going to be a mixture of results. So like there's a lot of things you can do. You can, you space in a test tube, and we can test that test tube for testosterone, cortisol, estrogen levels, progesterone for females, so we know what's happening to their menstrual cycle. Then you can have a DEXA scan, so you're looking at bone mineral density. If you're in a state of low energy availability for too long, your bones become less dense, they become less brittle. So with the DEXAs, you can kind of see this. You then have other subjective markers about how their digestion is working and stuff. Your liver gives off a few metabolites and proteins that indicate long-term and like low energy availability status and stuff. So we think that I hypothesize that a combination of these, so maybe testing an athlete once every 3 months, they'll come in, you do the DEXA, you test cortisone, you do bloods, you do all that, and you do this throughout the year, because everyone's going to be different in terms of those levels, if you get what I mean. Some people just have higher testosterone, some people have lower, so on. So the idea is that you would take a map of someone, and as they're going forward, you'd then be able to see for that individual changes in their levels within, whether it could be someone is more susceptible to a lower bone mineral content, or someone's more susceptible to a reduction in testosterone, and you'll be able to like identify a unique marker for that individual, saying you're in a hard training period, after this we'll make sure you get adequate recovery, restore energy availability, and then go forward again, if you get me.
Sound, yeah, that sounds deadly. So kind of twisting off that a little bit then, what stuff do you see, or have you seen general population do that's just way off the mark, and they shouldn't? Like, we've had conversations whenever you worked here about people doing stuff, and we're like, why are you doing this? So what do you see, and what do you think is the best course of action for people to avoid getting to this stage?
It can be a mixture of things, because it's not always necessarily, someone's overtraining. It can be someone just selecting inappropriate movements for their body at that current time. And a lot of this is restrictive mobility. So we say the M word, or we say the S word, are you doing your stretches, and like people just go to stretch. Well, that, yeah. I did 90 seconds beforehand, I'm good to go. And usually it's people selecting, doing cleans when they don't have adequate ankle mobility or the hip mobility to actually receive the bar safely, and they end up flexing at the trunk and they're putting their back out of position. It's just like I understand, because don't get me wrong, when I was going back to me playing rugby, I wanted to do what the pros did. What I saw on TV, I'm doing that, coach. And be like, Jack, I'm not too sure if you're ready. And I'm like, I'm telling you, coach, I am ready. So I know I was there, right? I know exactly what the feeling is. Yeah, like you see someone do a snatch and you're like, what weighs on that bar? 100 kilos, let me go. And you're like, I didn't do it. And but of course, you're so confident. Everyone's like, what if he does pull it off? It's so don't get me wrong. It's difficult to balance. It's hindsight is rich for me, and probably you as well. We've had that. We were in those positions beforehand when we were young trainees, when we were coming up, and we just wanted to be like the pros, because that's what gets you into your training. You have role models and so on. So you would say that, so it's being a little bit disciplined, that especially if you have a coach. So if you're someone who has a coach and you've paid the money to be coached by that individual, definitely listen to the coach when the coach says maybe today's not the day. And I'm not saying it's to point fingers or anything at anyone, but I'm saying that the coach will also let you push yourself when the time is right. So the coach isn't going to it might feel like, the coach never lets me do the things that I want to do, but realistically the coach wants to make sure that you're doing them safely and that you're doing them appropriately at the same time. And you say this all the time as well, so
100%. It's like we might be holding you back for a day or for a week or for a couple of weeks, but the whole point is long term. The goal isn't to be able to the goal is to be able to snatch 100 kilos tomorrow, but it's not going to happen. Therefore, let's build for it for the next 6 months and make sure that you're not just trying to snatch max out every time between now and then. I love that. A point you made there, and I spoke about it on another podcast before, is movement selection. And snatch being a real obvious one. Like for people who realistically, like most people just want to look and feel like the dog's bollocks. Like they just want to look unreal
100%.
and feel unreal. So like, what do you think are some things that people should prioritize for that? And what do you think that maybe people should just like push back? They don't need to never do it again, but just not make it a priority.
First of all, if they're doing the movements and they realize something's wrong and they're not being coached, step one is go get the coach. Okay, that's definitely step one. Or go get someone to to give you PT sessions or to take you away and to actually, because they can tell you a lot more quickly what you need to do to be able to eventually snatch than you going out on this lonesome crusade through YouTube videos to try and figure out why your snatch isn't working. Do you get what I mean? So there's that person as well. After that, there needs to be, I think, a big thing, especially for people that have only been in the training scene for maybe a year or two. They really need to not disregard their role models, because obviously, as we said, they were there before. They really need to realize that they're seeing the end product, or a product that has been in development for close to 15, if not more, years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like they see Matt Fraze, they see, Tia Claire, they see the tops and they're like, I'm doing that, like me next year. They don't realize that these are individuals that have not only been training for more or less their whole lives, for a large proportion that they've been professional athletes where they've been receiving the best of the best coaching and also training 2-3 times a day and recovering to them, like things that you may not do. So understanding that, like, to do those movements whilst keeping up your fitness and everything else is going to take a long time. That doesn't mean you can't have fun. Like, regress the movements. We've done this before with so many clients. Like, there's nothing wrong with regressing the movements. You're still taking part in some form of the movements. The same movement. It might not be identical to what the greats do, but it's definitely still some form of the movements. And you know soon that once you're doing your other work-ons outside of class, like working on your mobility, working on your foundational strength, one day you too will be able to do something similar along those lines. There really is no quick fix in terms of getting to where the greats got. It is something that takes time. So it's definitely, that's another thing for anyone else who's listening, just to understand that it's going to, like, if you're only just in the game, it's going to be a while. Don't give up, because you'll get there one day, but it's definitely going to be a little while.
Yeah, I think a big mistake people make is they watch like people they look up to, whether it's their coach or Matt Fraser or whatever, and they go, yeah, I'm doing that. And like you said, they've been doing it for 15 years and they've been training for 2. So really what they should be doing is, what did this person do 15 years ago? And that's what I'll do. And in 15 years' time, I'll be able to do that. But no one wants to play the long game. Everyone wants to look like, feel like they think they look like Matt Fraser. It's like
the end product, like they just want to be there already, like. Yeah.
Exactly. And
it's they're not there to enjoy. Yes, they're not there to enjoy the process of the journey should be the best bit. Where you go, oh, I remember where I used to look like a dog taking a shit when I used to snatch and stuff. Like, I need to get the part. Look, I used to look like I was taking a dive off the pier with the snatch. You know what I mean? And it's part of that journey going along and understanding that one day you too will get there. Like, and there is ways of. The thing is, they've also gotten to where that's another thing people need to understand as well. They've gotten to where they are over the last 15 years. And they're still the greatest now. But if you look at their training availability, I can tell you 15 years ago, they didn't have access to the coaches individuals have access to now. So you're, if anything, in an even better position. You're probably ahead of where Matt Fraser and where Tia were when they were 15 years ago, if you get what I mean. So you're probably now in a better position that in 15 years' time, there's no reason why you can't be at the same place, if not ahead of these great individuals. Yeah. So it's just being respectful and disciplined of respecting the time it takes to progress and develop a skill like anything else.
Yeah, I think a great example of that is if you go back on YouTube and watch like the 2009 CrossFit Games, like there's a video of Jason Khalipa who came first or second and he can't snatch 60 kilos. And it's like, girls, multiple women across Ireland can snatch that now. Never mind the fittest on earth back in 2009. Like, it just shows where that level's been, and that comes from, like you said, like the level of coaching now compared to what it was back then is just night and day.
So you have an even better chance of going to the games now than someone did 15 odd years ago.
Yeah.
You know, we're training to the games level now.
There you go. That's a great way to put it. Something I kind of wanted to ask you was, like, I was telling some of the lads recently that I was trying to get you on the podcast and I wanted to get you on, and we were talking about like the good times whenever you were here and how smart you are compared to the rest of us whenever it comes to the academic stuff, especially, like, and we're just kind of, like I've said already, some of the words you use, like, how do you take that level of science and technicality and such like real specific things and then apply them into the people you work with and your own training as well?
The first thing people need to understand is that the level that my academics goes into, so the level of technicality that the academics goes into, you do not need anywhere near that level of technicality to train general population people or to train even decent athletes.
Yeah.
So what my academics is in is where I'm trying to further the horizon of current knowledge and scientific understanding, which is way beyond, like, you're talking like working with the 0.01%. This, like, the stuff we're doing with might be applicable to, you know, of multiple Olympic athletes. But after that, like, it's completely not useless, but if the things that I do, like the things that I work with in terms of my academics, if that's what you're worrying about when you're only in the game 1 or 2 years, you have the mindset completely all wrong. Like, so, like, when it comes back to working with general population people, it's the same foundational pillars that your strength, your fitness, your body composition are going to be based on. And it's regular lifting of weights, regular commitment to some form of aerobic training, good, healthy, substantial eating, you know, adequate calories. It's the base. It's what you hear over and over again that's going to make the difference for them. Like, the most important thing with sorry, I don't mean to be using the word general population, but to your average Joes, to like someone who's not like going to the Olympics, to anyone, I would even consider myself, you know, a little bit gen pop. I'm not like when you look at the greats, there's there. But the most important things is that you keep coming back, adherence to your training program, that you do things regularly. Your body is a representation of what you regularly do, you know, and if you're regularly lifting weights, if you're regularly eating well, if you're regularly feeling good, and if you're regularly sleeping well, your body's going to probably look pretty good too, you know, and it's going to follow suit. So people need, like, that's one thing definitely when it comes to, yes, I have this understanding of like the far future distant galaxies, you know, in terms of training, but I'm not saying, like, for most people there's absolutely no need for that kind of knowledge to be able to train efficiently, to be able to train well, and to be able to get a lot from your training, to get fitter, faster, stronger. Now, the other part you said about that was, how does this incorporate into my own training? I do, when it comes to myself, apply a little bit more the science more often, because I like testing, you know, what the science says. You know, this is what the papers have shown to be somewhat true, or for these interventions to be shown to affect us. So I usually trial things on myself, and I'm quite a big believer in science, you know. But even with that, any sort of scientific interventions, they're usually done in randomized controlled trials with 100 people, where the majority of people had a positive outcome to this training. But you're still going to get individuals that will do that exact intervention and have a negative outcome. You know, there's far few of them and stuff, like, so doing mostly what we know to be good for the body in terms of health and fitness is already going to put you in a really good place ahead of everyone else that's doing nothing. Fact.
Savage. I love it, man. Last thing I kind of wanted to cover with you was, and we've touched on it already, was sobriety. Now, obviously you were kind of forced into that position, and maybe you did want to, like you said, you kind of did want to try it, but it's never something you've done. Like, I'm a huge fan of alcohol. I love wine. I love beer. I love to drink, but it's now the 21st of January and I've not had a drink all month. And I said to you before, like, my mood has gone up. My energy levels have gone up. My body looks better. I'm working better. I'm more productive. Like, I'm starting to see all these benefits, and I'm kind of going, how am I going to go back from this? So what are your general thoughts on it? No, yeah. What are your general thoughts around sobriety?
Well, first of all, congrats, because for me, going a week without the drink was torture, man. Like, it was impossible. In the past, if I didn't have pints on a Friday or a Saturday, do not come near me the following week. Like in my head, I'll be like, the whole week is ruined. You know, it's destroyed. I have to wait a whole another week before I can have pints again. This is a waste of my time, you know, like disaster, right?
Yeah.
But so definitely congrats on that front. But
Thanks,
like I said, it was I can understand, like, you're smart with how you have your alcohol. It's not something that you would use. Like, I remember, like, I was like nights out where the way I would work hard. I would work so hard during the week in terms of my college study and push myself with the clients and stuff, knowing that I have a release on the weekends. And it's like this subconsciously, you kind of get into the basic creating this deal with your own self, with your own hormones, with everything, your brain, the psychology. You're getting into this deal where it's like, I'm going to work the body hard Monday to Friday evening, knowing that I'll be able to have a release and have a cook off, you know, like just set the body off, you know, and just have a few drinks, and that's behavior, not so much the drinking in itself, it's that behavior that is the ill effect in the whole thing. So it's not having a pint that's bad, it's using the pints as like a psychological crutch for yourself. And it's the same with any sort of those habits, you know, smoking, drinking. They can all be said for the same thing, where people get up in the morning and work hard because they know they're going to have a cigarette and it's going to get them through the day and stuff. And it's not as easily kicked in the head, you know, when that's the way you're using the drink, you know, and stuff. If that's the way, if you're living for the weekends kind of thing, you know, just sitting in the office Monday to Friday, knowing you're going to be able to knock out a couple of pints in the weekend, it's going to be a lot harder. It's not just giving up, you know, a type of food. Yeah. Essentially, you're giving up something that's, you know, working with your mind and your body in a long way. So luckily is probably the only way I was going to be able to do it, but getting sick and not actually physically being able to drink or do anything was what ended up me being able to eventually kick us. Because I was in hospital for a bit, and then I went to like 4 weeks at home without being able to leave the bed, and then another 6-8 weeks I didn't leave the house. I wasn't doing any drinking or anything, and it wasn't until after all of that I was able to forget about the deal I'd made with myself, you know, going out in the weekends to do the hard work. So I was able to, over those couple of months from February onwards, I was able to begin working again, training again, but doing it without having to have that release on the weekend. And that's luckily for me, that's what made all the difference. Because now I've never felt more functioning. I've never felt healthier in myself. I've never felt more clear-minded. Like, anxiety, worry is no more. It's usually, instead of like getting an anxious thought, it's usually my inner monologue will go straight to providing a solution whenever problems come around. You know, it's a completely different ball game. Falling asleep is better. Staying asleep is better. My recovery from training is so much better as well. Like, of course, there's always that social aspect you're going to miss out on. And like during these COVID times, I'm kind of feeling it. But at the minute, from like all the troubles I've had in the past and stuff, I think it's a fair trade. Like, you can be very social in other things in your life. It doesn't have to be revolved around pints, you know, in the pub, like sitting by the fire and stuff, like cracking jokes and everything. You can be social in the gym, you can be social out in the street, you can be social going for a swim with your friends. There's many other things that you can do that can involve talking with someone, you know. So
I love it. Good for you, man. Nice one. That's I think that's plenty, man. That was deadly. Where can the people of YouTube and Spotify and iTunes, whenever we get this going, find you?
The people, they can find me on Instagram mostly. That's where I'm most active, because I am doing a lot of work. I like YouTube. It's it's a lot of work. So don't look at my YouTube, man. Like, I'll do a month of like trying hard, and then I'll just kick it. So Instagram is where you'll find where I'll keep most of my bits and pieces up to date, and that's at JO Fitness Nation. So that's the Instagram handle that you want to follow. Like, and I'd always keep my stories up to date more or less every day, and then I do a number of posts on things that I'm doing up in terms of training or whatever it may be in the coming future.
Savage. Jacko, thanks a mil, bro.
No worries at all, James. And thank you.